So, welcome to your 1 o'clock session. Hopefully you had a good lunch and aren't going to fall asleep in this one. But we think we'll keep you engaged for the rest of the hour. This session today is Fostering Transparency, Culture, Inclusion, and Pay Equity. We're excited to have you all here today and are fortunate and glad that we have the opportunity to share our experiences with you all. One thing that I recently learned is that you can't actually guarantee a safe space because I can't control how everyone is going to act and respond, but we can guarantee an inclusive space. So as a reminder, everyone's experiences are different, our backgrounds are different, and that really shapes our understandings. Okay, so I've been talking, but you don't know who I am. My name is Kelly Hux. I am a lead recruiter at UI Flow. So UI Flow, we are a very small 24-person startup. What we're doing is we're building out a new no-code or low-code product specifically for enterprise use, with really the goal of democratizing software engineering and helping people build at the speed of light. With me today, I have Tony Lee and Lizzie Enderly Bridey. I practiced that, and I've known her for 2 years. To Bridey. Lizzie, I will let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you.
Real quick logistics. These mics are for the recording, not for you. So if you, so we have to use them. But if you can't hear us, just raise your hand. We'll talk louder.
Do they project at all?
No.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I'm going to hold it further away then. Otherwise, the recording will be real loud. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Louder? Whew. All right.
Careful, she can be louder.
Hey, everyone. What's up? Little closer? Okay. I'm Lizzie Enderly to Righty. Thank you, Kelly. We only go by first name, so why would you ever need to know my full last name? But I am the head of people and talent at a startup called AgentSync. Coming on 2 years, I joined when we were less than 30 people. Now we are 220, which is wild, and I feel really lucky to just be on that journey. What AgentSync does, just really quickly, B2B SaaS infrastructure company in the insurance and regulatory industry. So, really fun stuff. We are hiring. I don't want to speak for the rest of this team, but we'll give you a shout out if our companies are hiring. I know it's a weird world we live in, so take a look at our careers page if you're looking or if I can help, but we are hiring, not for my team, I wish. But yeah, that's me, I guess. Background, just really quickly, I came from Twilio and SendGrid. It's where Kelly and I worked together. Worked there for 5 years, got to go through SendGrid going public and then being acquired by Twilio. Really amazing journey. And now I'm here. This is my 8th Denver Startup Week too. So yay.
Great. Hi, all. I'm Tony. Tony Lee. I work at Contentful. I'm the Senior Director, Head of Global Recruiting Operations. I joined Contentful about 350 employees almost 3 years ago. At the time, we were about 50 people San Francisco, nearly 300 Berlin. We decided that we wanted to open a Denver office 2 years ago. So I helped make some of our first hires in Denver. Today, we're about, I want to say 200, 300 people in Denver that we hired over the last mostly year and a half. So we are also hiring in Denver and all across the U.S. But today, total, we're about almost 800 employees. So in less than 3 years, 350 to 800, if you count attrition, which is going to happen for most of you in the HR world. It's a fact of life. We've hired over 700 people in the last 18 months, half of those in the U.S. Prior to here, I've done lots of other startups. I was with IAC, a portfolio company, for a long time. They owned Ask.com, Dictionary.com, Home Advisor, and most of those were 30, 40, 50-person startups that I helped bring to about 200, 400, 500 employees, and they spun out into their own companies. And in those cases, I was managing compensation, HR operations as well. And so when Lizzie invited Kelly and I for this topic, we thought it'd be a lot of fun to see where the industry's moved towards a very corporate finance banking kind of world, I guess. You could probably say maybe 10 years ago, where people like hit salaries and diversity and culture, to now like almost every candidate that we talk to asks us, what's your diversity? What do others make? And it's a normal conversation now. So that's what kind of brought us together for this conversation. Which actually, I guess, leads into me. I'm the first section, so you can tell we're very prepared. And probably we have notes, so just make sure we do this right. So we're going to kick it off with transparency and culture. So each section will go transparency. We'll start with culture. We'll dig in a little bit to inclusion, diversity, and then we'll end with a little bit of pay. Each of us will take a topic and ask each other some questions. So I'll start with a bit of culture. Originally, when we planned this, I'm like, what's the Webster definition of culture? And I don't want to do that to you. So, because I'm pretty sure everyone here in every company has a very different definition of what culture is to you and your company. So I'm actually going to throw it straight to Lizzie first and actually start off with, what does culture mean to you or to your company?
Cool. Yeah. So I think culture is this like broad word that means like everything and nothing. But when I think about it in terms of a company, it's the norms and ways of working. So oftentimes that translates into your values and your principles. But culture can more be the feel of the company and how you operate together. So that's really how I think about it.
Yeah, and as I started to think about culture, I started to think a little personally, like what is my culture? What does that mean? And it's really a mix of, everything. So it's our values, our traditions, our upbringings. It's a little bit of like what is and what is not right. Like even though we might not want to admit it for work, like it is. So it's really a mix of everything, that all of those experiences that kind of guide us into this culture of what it is we do, how we act every day.
I would say for myself, sorry, we're going to play a little microphone, pass the baton. For me, I would say, I actually wrote it down because originally I was going to find it for you. And so the definition is custom arts, social institutions, and achievement of a particular nation, people, or social group. So the way I took that when I looked at the definition was, what's your company's achievements? Or what's the right anti-word? Disachievements, unachievements? And those make up who you are. But to me, it was more like, how do I feel at the company? And do I align with that culture? How do people act here? Is it professional? Is it casual? Are things appropriate, not appropriate? Do I trust my leadership? Like, those are the kind of things I thought culture was. And when I asked a bunch of other colleagues, everyone had a different definition for it. So for me, it felt more like, well, then what culture are you creating? And do the people you hire or work for you connect with that culture? So that was for me in culture. So let's dig in a little bit more. I'm going to start with Kelly. So should culture and values stay the same over time, or should they evolve?
So that's a great question. So when I think of values at the core as staying the same. So if you think of like your personal values and maybe honesty, family time, adventure, that's something that may or may not have shifted your life. But as I was also thinking, I was like, well, personal note here, I'm 32, dating in Denver. What I was looking for and what was important to me at 22 is not what's important to me at 32. So those values have shifted. And then thinking about my company being 24 people right now, I know our culture is going to shift. I know our values are going to have to shift as we continue to grow and invite more people into our space.
Great. So same question to you, Lizzie. Should culture and values stay the same as a company grows, or should they evolve?
think I'm same page as Kelly. I think they naturally need to stay, they need to point to the North Star that you have, but every company I've worked at, over a long period of time, they evolve. Whether it's you started with 9 and you really narrowed in on what your values are. So it's okay for them to evolve and for you to say, you know what, based on how we've grown, we need to focus more on this. So I think being adaptable and comfortable with that in terms of a company, same way Kelly's dating life totally changes what you're looking for over time. Same with the company. So I think, though, when I think about some company values, you tend to see customer love, a flavor of that, wear the customer's shoes. That's never going to go away. You're never going to say we stopped caring about our customer. That would be really bad. So I think they tend to stay directionally the same. Yeah.
So you're going to get a lot of this. So hopefully the goal for this session today wasn't necessarily to give you the secret sauce. I wish we could. I don't think anything we're going to talk about has any silver bullet. And so hopefully we'll have some different opinions that you can figure out what works for you. And I say that because I'm going to disagree with both Kelly and Lizzie in the sense of, I think they alluded to this in a way. They're on the premise of more culture and value should stay the same. That's the foundation that you build a startup on or a company on. But at the same time, my example of just where I came from is in the sense of I started at 300 employees at Contentful. Today we're nearly at 800. We've added over 700 people. But if we're only at 800 employees and we added 700 people, then either some people left twice or replaced the same role twice, or only 100 people who worked here more than 2 years ago are still here. So from my attitude, it's culture and values are kind of the sum of your people and what you want to accomplish. And a lot of that was also our leaders changed too. So I don't know. I think we tried for a very long time, like 5 years, we had the same value, which was customers and employees. But early startup was also more like, yes, we want to make money, but usually your early seed money is more about how do you innovate and attract people. So for our early values were be creative, be bold. But today, our goal now is at Series F, if we don't look like we're making money, we're not going to make it in IPO. So at this point, now it is customers first, be humble, strive together. Like there's still some core values there. But we've added customer first, then work backwards as a value, and then a growth mindset that was kind of a spin-off of being creative, but intentionally, like, we're growing fast. So what are you going to do with it? So our values changed. I think culture is the sum of your people, and we're more than half different than we were yesterday. So at the very least, if you don't change your values and what you perceive your culture to be, I would definitely make it an exercise in your companies to pause and stop and reflect on what your values and your culture is, and is this the direction we want to keep going in? So, cool.
That was excellent.
I know, I love that. Kelly and I we like low-key prep for this, but like really like that. I think that resonates. We'll have to, if we have time at the end for questions, we should like.
I don't know if we low-key. We typed a lot of pages, but then when you're actually up here, it's like, what are you actually going to say? So
well,
anyway.
We're not going to read off scripts. That would be so boring. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Last question on culture. How would you navigate recognizing or knowing for yourself or your company that the culture doesn't fit you anymore, or that it needs to change? And I'm going to start with you, Kelly.
Lizzie.
Oh, sorry, Lizzie. I read Kelly.
All good. I know. It's okay.
I'm going with the mic, not the
I know,
words
you're
on
going
paper.
with the order on the paper. So when I was thinking about this one of how do you evaluate if you're interviewing and you're trying to figure out if a company's right for you, or you're going through this growth and the company is changing. And I think you have to start with yourself and think about what are your own values. Kelly talked about this a little bit. What are your values? What are your ways of working? Like, do you value timeliness and responsiveness in your interactions, or are you, spoiler, I'm like this. I'm allergic to the hustle culture and like this culture of immediacy with everything. I'm like, some emails don't need to be responded to within a day. Or do you make decisions quickly? Do you prefer processing time? So like think of how you like to work and really like dig in on how other people operate. I wouldn't do super well with people who want me to respond to every email within 24 hours. It's not possible for me. I get like 700 emails a week, and it's also not, I prioritize. But that's important to think about. If I wouldn't work well at a company, they'd be really upset with me, right? Also, do you value collaboration, even if it takes longer to make decisions, or do you value speed and quick movement? Do you like ambiguity? I think that's a really big one for startups. And then going into this growth stage, I think Tony and I are kind of more in growth mode. So do you value that? Do you like that? I think a lot of people are like, yeah, I'm comfortable with change, but not everyone is, and that's okay. But you have to also evaluate that. So I think that would help someone figure out if the company is right for them, or if over time it's just really changed. You're like, wow, something feels off, but I can't pinpoint it. And then you have to think of what are your default ways of working? How do you like to work? And does that align? And it's okay if it doesn't. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great response. That's what I probably should have done when I left my last company. But I'm very, I'm a Cancer. I'm very intuitive. I'm with the energy, and the energy wasn't right. So that was my decision to change culture. But I think as
Still talking about dating? No.
not dating. But as a company, as you're continuing to grow too, I think it's important to continuously reassess what that culture is. If you're at a very small company like I am, and you talk to the CEO or the founders every day, slide into your meeting, just add an action item. Add an action item there to really discuss our values. Ask the founders, okay, this is one of our values. How do we act this out every day? What does this look like for our employees? How do our employees respond to this on a day-to-day? So that you're constantly collecting that information and forcing them to think, because their mind might be on building out that product or building that revenue if they're Series F, so that they can IPO, So constantly bring it up to your team so that you can make those changes when necessary before it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I'll add to that is my advice is just create the safe space. Or I think I'm going to say that word a lot today is you don't know unless someone tells you. And if you don't create the opportunity for someone to say something, whether it's an engagement survey or a pulse survey or just an open forum or add it to an agenda item for all the departments, because if most people in this group are HR or founders or leaders or entrepreneurs, and you're reading any of the news, then you hear COVID, you hear recession, you hear great resignation, and I think the topic of the day is quiet quitting. And so if you don't create the space, and people are just going to either quit on you or afraid to quit because it's a recession, but they'll just do the bare minimum to make sure you pay them and not fire them. And so my advice would be do what you can to make sure that they have an avenue to express themselves. And sometimes you're going to say, this is not the right space then, but let's figure out together what is the right space for you. And if it doesn't work, we'll move on. A good example for me was, hopefully no one watches this back from my last company. I won't say their name, but yeah, but they'll know if I give this example though. But I remember interviewing for them years back, and the interview was at 6 o'clock, and they're like, oh yeah, it was a bunch of executives. I do a presentation, so I figured it's just after hours. Everyone's going to stay behind for me to do my presentation, that everyone had the same hour free. And I get in, and the entire office is still there. And I'm like, oh, it's this kind of startup. And when I finished the interview on my way out, I was very straightforward with the HR manager. I'm like, hey, I have a kid and a kid coming, and if it's like this all the time, 6, 7 o'clock checkout, it's like, oh, and her feedback was, well, everyone gets here about 10, 11, 12. I'm like, yeah, but I'm not staying. And she's like, no, the culture's evolving where as we get more inclusive and diverse, and it's not expected for you to stay so late. I'm like, okay, but that's where, in your own experience and for your employees, flags will raise. And how do you open that door for them to raise those flags? And then how do you check them throughout your company journey? In fairness, it half changed and it half didn't change, because our CEO was the kind of CEO that had like 3 of those electronic skateboards, and it was funny because it was a car sharing company, but he never drove. He just skateboarded everywhere. But it was mostly 30 and under, and so that was the culture. And as we grew, we started bringing more experience in to try to one, grow, but also change kind of the attitude. So there was intent and effort, but in the beginning it was definitely one of those things where it was kind of a fight to work the way I wanted to work versus how everyone else was hired to work. So anyway, cool. All right. Sorry, I keep checking the top. I have a stopwatch. There's no
Yeah, we're trying to be really like conscious of your time and maybe even wrap a little early. I don't know. We're chatty, so
But then again,
good luck.
There's no session after this.
Yeah, so we're gonna go for another hour after.
Unless you want to stay for cryptocurrency at 3 o'clock.
Just stick around. We'll keep talking till 3. You're welcome. No, actually, hard pass on the 6 till 6 p.m. working ever. So gross. And you brought up quiet quitting. And I think that quiet quitting is the subtle flex we have of like setting our boundaries and being like, this is what you're paying me for. This is what a salary pays for. This is what 40 hours a week looks like. It's not you have me every night and every weekend and 24/7. And so I actually really like the quiet quitting flex we all have. Okay, but we're going to talk about inclusion now. And sorry, I say some spicy things, so I don't know. Okay, so when it comes to inclusion and aligning with companies and their people, like how do we build and create inclusive spaces and teams? How we create ways of working and how we create safety for people. As Kelly mentioned in the beginning, if you didn't catch it, because I know it's a little noise in the beginning, no company, no space can guarantee safety because we can't control all the actions around us, and I love that. So thank you for teaching me that too. But how do we make space for different ways of working, different expectations, different boundaries, quiet quitting, boundaries, different values, and setting expectations of a company's own expectations and preferred ways of working, which I think they do through culture and values. But with that, there's this idea of companies asking people to bring your whole self to work, right? And it's widely used, in my opinion, in tech and the startup community. And just when I think about this, I'm like, is it fair to ask people to do that? Is that actually what companies want? Is that what individuals want? And what does it look like to bring your whole self versus a flavor of your work self to work? What does it look like to be inclusive, and how can companies do a better job hearing what people actually want? So I'm going to start with Tony. What are your thoughts on someone, sorry, I give tons of context, and this is like my default. If we ever talk and it's like an interview setting, I do all this context setting, and then you're like, what question are you asking me? Like, it's not a trap, it's just context, and you can go whatever direction you want. But Tony, what are your thoughts on someone bringing their whole self, and where have you seen this work and not work?
So I am a firm believer that you should be able to bring your whole self to work. IAC was a good example in the sense of it was created by a media conglomerate. He used to be the CEO of Paramount. Everyone knows Barry Diller, CEO of Paramount and Fox for a while, and then realized the internet was the future. This was like 80s, 90s. This is how. Don't watch this, Barry Diller. But that's how old he is, and he's since passed on the company. But it was run very much like an investment firm or a financial startup. Not to say that people said don't bring your whole self to work. It's just diversity and inclusion wasn't the conversation. And so I saw it trying to recruit for a company where it's like, they need a Harvard degree. They need Ivy League. Where are they coming from? Where are your peers? Who used to be in your, who used to be in your frat together? Let's talk to them. Like, this is so old ago. And I felt like people came to work thinking they had to be a certain type of person to be successful. And so then it's our main questions of what's appropriate at work, what's inappropriate at work, what's professional mean, lots of buzzwords. And then I went to Workday and then went into other startup worlds. Workday was as big as IAC, but they were very big on, they had one of the first head of diversity and inclusion and equity. And they created a whole Twitter feed of just, and created a whole theme called Vibe, which was values, inclusion, equity. I missed the B. It's on my paper somewhere. But at the end of the day, it's part of the theme. It's part of our culture on who are you? Let's talk about it. Let's celebrate our differences. And would you want to bring your whole self to work? I don't know. But would you like the option to bring your whole self to work? Of course, then as we did it, you start going down this line of, well, great. Some people went way above and beyond, and where's your tolerance for that? And so I don't know. Those are questions that's why I didn't jump into HR. I stayed on the recruiting side, because then it started going into spaces where like I don't want to answer that question. I just want people to know that they should feel comfortable coming to work. But Kelly,
Yeah.
how do you feel about bringing your whole self to work?
So, personally, I do not bring my whole self to work. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not authentic, because I'm still this person you see that's very quirky, goofy, forcing our leadership team to do improv exercises in meetings. Like, that is essentially me. But when I think of whole self, the reason I don't bring my whole self is because I know that some parts of Kelly might be a little messy. Some parts, when you think of whole self, like literally someone's whole self, could be polarizing in the workplace. So I opt not to bring those parts that could offend someone else. And it's definitely not the, I feel like in HR, saying opposite of what everyone says. But for me, it's finding that balance between like being authentic and then covering others from parts of me that I know I don't like, and then also covering myself. So one thing personally, I stopped watching the news in 2020 because it was wrecking my mental health. But then at work, we would still have some conversations that would still wreck my mental health. So I chose to opt out of those, and that was me removing part of my whole self from the workplace. And I'm much better now that I don't have my whole self in the workplace. So everyone's gonna be a little different. I feel like it's, like Tony said, giving the opportunity for everyone to feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to work. You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm also personally a very private person, so it makes sense that I don't bring my whole self to work, because I have friends that I've known for 2 years, and they say, like, I don't really know anything about you, but I like you. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, I'm okay with that. Like, that works for me if it works for you. So, I mean, everyone's a little different, but I think the big part is just making the workspace comfortable for everyone to have the option to bring their whole self.
Love it. And I think on the same theme, being someone who's now in the people world, and I'm like, how am I in the people world? I'm going to I was mostly in talent, and now I'm like, I could get myself into trouble, because Lizzie whole self also has strong opinions. And in a people role in particular, you don't get to wear that lens when you're making processes and systems and things for everyone. Now, you can decide if the company is aligned with this is unacceptable or this is acceptable, and then that helps you align with that. But I'm also not bought into bringing the whole self. I think there's emotional labor doing that. I think the risk of you creating a less safe environment goes up, because you are welcoming all of these things, and then you're going to need to address them or put the line in the sand when something happens. I like the possibility of it. I really, really do. I just think there's also ways of working at a company, and it is easier both for individuals and companies if you're kind of like, these are our ways of operating. This is what is and is not what we like find acceptable, or however you want to say it. I'm allergic to the word professional too, because I think it's like such a loaded term of like, how do you define professional? Is how I'm dressed, or if I swear, I have sworn at an all hands. Like, is that acceptable? It's not professional. F-bombing and an all hands not professional. But is it okay? Like, what's your I don't know. Is it okay in your culture? So, yeah, same line.
I'm going to your all hands.
No, I got to rein it in. There's too many people. I will offend someone. I don't want to offend anyone. That would suck. Oh, well, sorry. I think that's still a swear word. Okay, I'm gonna move on to our next question though. So, how do you help people feel included, especially when their interests, boundaries, values, or identity could make them feel othered? Who am I starting with? You take your pick. Whoever's ready.
Sure. I guess I'm ready. I think the big piece here is really like just, I hate to say culture again, but it is really culture, and creating an environment where, different opinions, different types of people, backgrounds, etc. are welcome. Some of that labor is going to come from us. It's going to come from your coworkers, your employees, where you're bringing other people into meetings. Maybe there's someone that started that's maybe junior, and you want to bring them in as like a shadowing thing. And it's also not building them professionally. It is for sure building them professionally, but you're also including them in conversations that they may not have been included in before. So I think just the day-to-day of like connecting with people, learning about people, bringing them into conversations, taking time to understand where people come from is a big one. I think a lot of times we listen to respond, and we don't listen to just like digest and be like, oh, that's really great. I'm glad you shared that with me. So doing a mix of those is really how I go about making sure an environment is more inclusive.
Thank you. For me, sorry, that was my like pause moment. Like, what am I going to say? I'm going to thank Kelly first. Thank you. I'm going to take this from a very recruiting perspective, in the sense of usually when people say diversity, inclusion, how do we make change? What do you do to foster change? And on the executive side or the planning side of the house that most employees don't see, it's like, how do we go hire 100 people who are diverse right now and just throw them in the mix, and then I'll just solve all our problems, right? And everywhere I've gone, it's like, what's your diversity hiring plan? How are you, junior, senior, where are you going? But they aren't addressing the issue with the actual people in the company. Not to say go fire half your company, but the problem is that then we go top of funnel. We go add in 50% women or ethnic races or disabilities, but no one knows what to do with them. No one knows. We end up with still hiring white men, and so my advice would be, don't move too fast and think that there's an easy solve for any of this, because, and I apologize if you came here thinking there's an easy solve, but there just isn't. And what I've seen work is we stop talking about, we still do the hiring front, like how do we partner with local communities, Girls Who Code we do in Europe. We tap Built-in in Colorado to help us with a bunch of diversity focused newsletters and content. We do Black MBA partnerships with local universities. So we're doing our part to get people, as many people as possible in the selection process. But if you don't know how to check your bias or have the conversation internally about what a different holiday looks like or what our values are, then you're never going to hire the right person, or the people you're hiring are going to see right through you and be like, ooh, you're trying, and I'm like the token diversity person, but you don't get it. And so what we've done at Contentful was we basically way slowed down and said, hey, let's create an inclusion and diversity working group. We don't have ERGs yet. But at least if we start here, let's open the conversation amongst peers on, well, what are we not doing? What are we doing? And we flipped it to where instead of DE and I, it's now I and D. So we purposely focus on the inclusion first now, on what are events we can do where we, and we do this half on purpose. We'll flip an all hands every couple weeks where all 700 people are going to show up. And last minute, we changed the topic to something completely diverse about diversity and inclusion. And everybody shows up and we talk about it. And so at this point, it's more about the education and the training on how to recognize diversity and what to do with it. And out of that, we've actually, we still don't have any official ERG groups, but out of it, we've spawned LGBTQ, we've spawned women in sales, African American, and these are all like silo groups that have worked on their own now, asking for executive sponsorship and money, which we want to give them. But it kind of worked out on its own, in a sense of if we give people space and start talking about it, people feel comfortable organizing and wanting to make a difference in their own company. So that's how we've addressed it.
Thank you. That was so much. We could definitely go another hour talking about building representative teams. You have some nerdy recruiters up here, but also just kind of going back to helping people feel included. I think to close out this topic, I think at like something each of us can do as individuals is just asking people how they like to work, what feels good, and how do they like feedback, how do they like to be recognized. And I think if you do that and you make that a part of your culture and make people feel seen and like take notes how they want to be recognized and get feedback, especially if you're a people manager, and then operate that way. And when you get feedback or you need to be corrected, say thank you. Like say thank you, and if it's a correction of you did something wrong, apologize and say thank you and learn, and then do a Google for yourself. Please don't ever ask someone who's teaching you something within DEI why what you said was harmful or whatever it is. It's my biggest pet peeve. I'm working on it too. Actively learned that and like working on that. Do the Google. But think of ways that you would want to be included, and then share that, like do that for someone else and ask them what feels good for them. But we're going to close out this topic because we have one final really like spicy topic.
Very spicy.
I think. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think this is the spiciest. But okay,
one.
Kelly, over to you.
Yeah. So, great segue into transparency with pay equity. Very spicy. So in the last month, we know that California has introduced a new law requiring employers to post pay ranges and job descriptions. It's pending being signed into law, which I did not check again today, so I hope it still is pending. Well, no, I don't hope that it's still pending. I just hope that I'm giving you correct information. That's what I mean. Sorry, let me clarify.
I hope it's approved.
Let me clarify that. Definitely created a buzz. For us in Colorado, of course, we know that this isn't new. We already have this as a law, but there's also so much more that goes into pay equity than posting a salary on your job description. Lizzie, we'll start with you first. As a people leader, what does pay equity mean to you, and how do you encourage transparency in your organization?
I love this topic so much. And I was just talking with someone at work about this because it's also really hard when you're a startup, and I'll talk about that. But first, to me, pay equity is the systems and the processes and the approach that a company has in place to ensure that they are consistent in their pay approach and philosophy. So you're being consistent with your offers, your ranges, and that you're clear on what you're doing. Now, I think that companies get scared because context and diligence doing this work is really important. Companies are terrified to talk about this, right? And I think like we all see that. There's like flavors of scared, but we want to act like we're cool talking about it. But I think it's important getting comfortable with the data and what it means, and then being able to talk comfortably about it. And if you can't talk about it comfortably, something's probably wrong. Maybe you haven't looked at the data. Maybe you've just tried to figure out what someone used to make and then make them an offer off of that, which is not the right way to do it. But what's really hard, I think, when you're a startup is that you're wearing a ton of hats. And I'm still in this stage, right? Generally, an early stage startup doesn't have a comp person. And so it ends up being a head of people or talent, like right here doing that work, also delegated to my sourcer and my head of talent. So you're doing that work on top of all the other things that you're doing. You become a comp analyst. And compensation data is a money-making industry. Like, let's be real. It's a money-making industry, so you have to pay for the data. Companies have to pay for this data. Then they have to like contribute to the data, pull the data. It is an enormous, enormous project. And then you need data on all roles and levels that you're hiring for. So it's really tricky because if you don't have the time and resources to do the diligence of building out specific base, total cash, and total comp ranges, then analyzing that with market data and writing down a compensation philosophy, it's really hard to be transparent with people because you have to give the context on where these ranges came from, what your philosophy is, how that was decided, and then even beyond that, why that specific person is within the range where they are. That's why I think it's scary for companies, because it takes like so much time. I'm in the thick of it. People want ranges. I'm like, I'm not there yet. Please wait. Like, I want to give you all the things in context. Now, salary ranges on job descriptions, it's like step one. Doesn't give you the full picture. And we can do so much more, but that's my 2 cents on why it's like so hard. If anyone was curious why like companies kind of, or in my opinion, why it's nuanced and we keep it close, but yeah.
Thank you. Tony, what are your thoughts?
So Lizzie loves this topic. I hate this topic. I actually was almost not allowed to come here because of this topic. Because, sorry if anyone listening contentful, not for the reason like we're not pay transparent. It's just one of those things where it's always going to be something someone's going to be upset about their salary or someone somewhere, and so it's not that I wasn't allowed to come here in the sense of like the question is, are you proud of your compensation philosophy? Do you have a philosophy? How do you pay people? Like, I don't think anyone can confidently say, I'm really excited about our pay philosophy or how we pay employees. Because I think you're always gonna have someone where you feel like, did they make too much money? Did I not pay them enough? Are we paying equitable? And so I think the fear of this topic was why in discussion with my team was, do I want to talk about this? Is this a conversation we want to have right now? How does this reflect on my own company? So my answer in regards to how I feel pay equity is, at the end of the day, you're never going to get it right perfectly. Not everyone's going to be happy. But as long as you have a plan and a structure, if you can get compensation data, yes, it's a money-making industry, but at the same time, I think you just need a basis so that that it's fair and equitable, in my opinion. And if you're not being transparent, if you're not saying, hey, Jane makes $80K and Joe makes $75K, and you're not putting it on a billboard, because that seems weird too, right? Like, I'm going to just put a poster up and show everyone's salary. Then at the very least, you're saying, well, what's our philosophy? Like what ranges do we pay in? Is there a philosophy? What data do we use? How do you determine where someone falls in the data? To at least give someone the answer they need to feel like, okay, you thought about it, and I fall in it somewhere, and then let them disagree with that statement.
And then don't we always want more money? Even if we're paid really well, don't we always want more money? No one's ever like, I think I'm paid fairly. You're paying me well, but I'm good. No, like, always more money.
It's like if you get overpaid in your paycheck, it's like, are you going to, I don't know, depends on how much you get overpaid, hopefully. But like, if it's like a double paycheck, would you say something, So, or if you know the law really well in like California, they can't take the money back unless you sign a waiver. I don't know, something like that. But it's much better where I am today. Like where I am today, we have a philosophy. It's equitable. It's about your experience. The evaluation from the team based on Radford data and a very clear and concise job level matrix. So we try very hard to put it into a formula that then goes into performance reviews. So for me, transparency there is how our structure is transparent, but are we going to share your private salary? I feel like that's a choice that you should have on whether you want to share it or not. Which leads us to the next question. So I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, no, but definitely some really good points there that you guys mentioned in terms of building out that compensation philosophy. If you're small, you might not have that. You might not even be thinking about it. You're just trying to figure out on a day-to-day, how much do we pay this person? Lizzie mentioned all the background data information that goes into building that comp philosophy and building out those ranges. Like, it's a lot. Like, the last company I was at was 8,000 people, and even then with a full comp team, they struggled to keep up with comp data and what was market competitive. So a team for one, for me, like, it's a struggle sometimes to try to figure out what that balance is. And I do end up asking candidates actually too, like, what's your expectations? I'm not asking to pay you low. I'm asking to see really if the data that I have is accurate at this stage for me. So lots to think about there. But leading into pay transparency and sharing those, your compensation with coworkers or maybe with the whole company. So if you're on Instagram, or actually it might be on TikTok, but I'm not on TikTok like that. So Instagram, we'll stick with it. If you're on Instagram, you might see the salary transparency street. What's it called? Not channel, but account. Where a host, I promise I'm only 32. I promise. But you might see that where a host asks strangers what they do and how much they make. So we'll start with Tony. What are your thoughts on sharing compensation with other employees and having it as a company standard potentially?
Oh, sorry, I don't know which microphone. I'll take two. I kind of shared it where I'm the belief that you share your own. I was at a company once where if you shared your salary, it could be a write-up, and that was a long time ago. Because then you put your colleagues at risk. That was kind of the HR lingo at the time. Or you're creating unfair tension in the workplace. I don't know. Nowadays, I think, how can you avoid TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, whatever the social medias? Would you share salary on Snapchat? I don't know. But how can you avoid it if today you also have your salary.coms and your Glassdoors and your LinkedIn's, and then you do have the paid versions of like Radford, and then a lot of startups do Option Impact. It's like it's all this stuff where, and if anyone's ever compared Radford to Option Impact, they're very, very different. The same roles, like two different salaries. And then you go to your Glassdoor and salary, and it's like, if you tweak the title just slightly different and maybe the city next to you, all of a sudden you make 100K more. So it's hard. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and I think the challenge is you just got to pick one. And then when it comes to sharing your salary, I remember long time ago when I first worked at Macy's, I remember, and MySpace just came out, I had to sign a waiver saying I will not share my job on MySpace or any social media. I think nowadays you just can't, you can't do that anymore. I mean, it depends on what your role is, but you can't stop you from sharing. So my attitude is, if you want to share your comp, share your comp. If you feel like you have an equitable practice where you are in and about the right comparable person to that person who's sharing, and you feel good that you're being equal and just with that person's salary and their colleagues and peers, then you should have nothing to worry about if you're plus or minus, a couple thousand. So that's my opinion. If you want to share, share it. But I think as a company, you shouldn't encourage it.
What are your thoughts, Lizzie?
So, first of all, I'm assuming a lot of us in this room are in talent and people roles. Please don't discourage people. Like, if people want to share it, they should share it, and it is legal. So you're going to get yourself into trouble if you're like trying to sway them away. Like, it is protected by law to share this. Now, it may be wrong. I think that's why we're nervous about it, right? Because it, like, context, understanding the data, it's so nuanced, all right? But like, don't if people want to talk about it, like, let them talk about it. Help them. Help normalize the conversation and like share ranges and information, and help like do that. I personally love pay transparency. I remember the first time, it was several years ago, but one of my peers shared what he made with me, and I made less. I was still paid like what I thought was fair, and he had more experience than me. It made sense, but I just really like appreciated the act of sharing, and I've started doing it. The best feeling was when a friend of mine was about to accept an offer and calls me and is like, can you just like check numbers with me? I love that. Like, let's all help each other get paid, know what the data is, and like support our industry too. So I personally love it. I share with people. If you want to know how much I make, ask me after. Totally happy to tell you all. But like, let's do this, because it also, we've seen this shift in especially recruiting. Now we're kind of in a recession, right? But like January of this year, recruiters were in demand and salaries went up so much. It was fascinating to see. I love it. And everyone was getting paid. My friends were calling and like making way, way, way more money. Love it. So I'm super supportive of sharing it. And as data points, I love it. Again, for companies, like, context matters. It's also a ton of work. That's the reason I haven't shared that with my company yet. It's like someone's full-time job that we are trying to do as a side job on top of like a few other things. So that's why it's hard, but yeah, share away, ask away.
Well, we have just a few more minutes left. I think I'll let Tony wrap us up.
Yeah. So, well, thank you all for joining us today. We actually kept you for an hour. If we open up to questions, I think we have the room for an hour, but we probably won't record it. But as I promised in the beginning, if you came here for answers, I apologize if we didn't tell you what to do or how to structure your culture at your company, your values, your diversity and inclusion plan, or your pay compensation plan. If that was the intent, I apologize, because we didn't give you any answers. But hopefully you can tell from 3 very different startups that and having worked at larger companies, it doesn't get easier. Everyone does it different. I think the question is, to me, everyone in HR space here mainly, and founders and entrepreneurs, if you're in this space, really the question more is, how do I make my company successful and retain my employees? And so for me, I would close with, hopefully the discussion today, you can find elements in our different opinions to figure out what questions you need to ask yourself and your leaders to figure out how do we move forward. And if anything, as a startup, the one thing you have to be used to is that things will always change. So, so why not HR as well? But I think we had a lot of buzzwords too. I think for culture, pay transparency, diversity, bring your own self. What's diversity? What's appropriate? I mean, that's a buzzword. I think some of these things you have to define what your company wants to do. Is it a professional work environment, casual work environment? If we say everyone's self is welcome and someone comes with chaps and a boa, like, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate? Like, you're gonna have to define that on how far you take it, and where you want to be accepting versus maybe distracting, another buzzword. So I'll leave you with those buzzwords to figure out. I think that'll define what you do with all 3 topics moving forward.
You just reminded me of so we had a bunch of prep sessions where we mostly just chit-chatted, and you just brought me back to some of our fun little side chats about distractions and like what's professional. It was fun. We had a lot of fun. Yeah, thank you.
Any last thoughts, Lizzie, Kelly? We didn't plan for that. I'm just throwing it out there.
We wish you all double salaries in your next paycheck, and that they can't take it back. I don't know. Yeah, does anyone have questions? We're at time, but.
For one. We have 1 minute.
Yeah, one question. Do you want to moderate?
Oh, sure, I will moderate.
Take a mic from me.
Yeah. So the question I had, oh wow, Tony, wow.
Hi. Hello.
Exceeding expectations.
So the question that I had was part of your earlier conversation around transparency, and it possibly includes inclusion as well. How do you feather in the experience that you have for some of your hires that have had other experiences with cultures that are typically deemed or looked at as younger, and making those 2 marry where it's productive for everyone? Does that make sense? Lizzie's giving me, yeah. So if you have, Yeah. Okay, just making sure. So you have a culture that's typically younger, right? You have the startup culture, which is part of Startup Week. But when people attribute growth, they're thinking about people who are experienced, and they come with experience, and maybe that's in years and age and differing ways. How are you feathering and like marrying those two so that you keep the youthfulness of your culture while growing with the experience that you're bringing those people on?
That's a great question. So for me, I think the youthfulness really comes from like the energy. Well, this is in startup world too. So the energy really comes and youthfulness comes from like being willing to experiment, having room for failure and reiteration. So that's where you're getting that, at least. And my startup is also not like super young. Like we're older adults. That's where I see that coming in. And then when we do board younger people, they're still comfortable because you're still getting that opportunity to take risks. You're still getting that level of ownership. We're not like, if you do want to go for drinks or something after work, like you have the opportunity to, but we also have people that leave to go to swim lessons with their kids at 3 o'clock. And so it's just having room for both of those.
Okay, so I've been thinking about this in terms of, so I'm now out of, I would consider my company out of startup phase and more into growth phase, right? And when you're in this startup early stage, you're scrappy, you're doing all the things, you're wearing all the hats. Now you're still wearing all the hats. And now, granted, I'm like 225, so not that big, but now it's like building in systems and processes and automation to make the jobs easier. So you have to be more comfortable with ambiguity still, which comes with the early stage startup, but you also have to be comfortable with like the fact that building processes and like things in place kind of slows you down. If you liked that fast, I'm going to do it this way, and you don't need to like check with anyone. It slows it down because you're building a scalable system. When it comes to hiring, got to be careful thinking just about years of experience because it's super biased, right? Either this person has too much experience, they can't possibly be a mid-level hire, whatever it is. That's wrong. And then this person doesn't have enough years of experience, so they couldn't possibly be this level. That's also wrong. But if you think about it in terms of like a combination of breadth and depth of experience, so what you've seen and the iterations and change you've gone through throughout your career and what that looks like, I think that'll set you on a better course. But and then to Kelly's point about just like culture-wise, I have a second one on the way. I've got a kid at home. I'm a hard pass on any after-work activities. It's not my thing. I don't want to come. I appreciate being invited, but I am like a JOMO person, like all the way through. JOMO, joy of missing out. I do not have FOMO. The only FOMO I will have is if I miss out on like my kid and like something really special there, or my partner and something really special there. I have no JOMO for work. Hard pass on evening things. Always. Even if you're like my best friend. Like Kelly and I have known each other a long time. We don't really like, we did dinner once? I don't know. Yeah, no. So my 2 cents. I don't know if that helps, but yeah. But other people love drinks and after work things. Cool. Totally cool. I'm older than Kelly. I get all my TikToks on Instagram. But I'm like trying to be like the cool mom. Like, I'm not a regular mom. I'm a cool mom. That's, yeah.
My little Amazon Alexa now shows me like, hey, what you missed on TikTok. So it's like.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Or like I don't know. But
also, no one should be on TikTok. It's really bad for your phone and data privacy. Like, come on. Like, don't. You can get it on Instagram like your fellow old person. I'm not that old, but like,
My only FOMO is I have JOMO too, I guess, now that I know what that means.
Best.
My only FOMO is like I love free food. I'll be quick on this one. My quick opinion there is at Contentful, we've started this whole new trend of hiring for, it's a mouthful, behavioral competency-based hiring. So the idea is that can you do the job? Does past behavior show that you can do the work in the future? And that theoretically is like years agnostic. Like it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And Radford actually changed their matrix over the years, where they used to say 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, 10 plus. Now it's more, I think it's this rope analogy, where it's like, are you learning how to use the rope? Are you one of the people working on the rope? Do you design the rope? But they purposely don't say, have you had 5 years working in the rope industry? So at this point, I think people are starting to move more towards it's a trap if you start saying years of experience, because some of the young folks who are entrepreneurial will outshine some of the older folks who could be complacent. But then again, it's hard to replace experience too. So what are you solving for and why? And I think you hire that person and pay them appropriately.
Sufficient answer? Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Well, thank you all. We're going to hang out for a little bit, but really, really appreciate all of you coming out. Thank you.